Miami Condo Mondays is a live podcast on the first workday of the week at 4 p.m. South Florida time. The program features former journalist and current Wall Street consultant Peter Zaleski of the Miami Condo Investing Club and former lender and veteran condo broker Jenny Huertas of CBRealty.com. Recorded weekly in greater downtown Miami, this 1-hour discussion will provide a refreshing and sometimes controversial perspective on the state of the South Florida condo market from a pair of seasoned real estate professionals who do not always agree. The program won't tell you what to think about the South Florida condo market, but will give you something to think about before buying, selling, taking listings, or financing units. This podcast is not authorized by the Miami real estate industry and will quite possibly annoy many of its figureheads. Welcome to this week's episode of Miami Condo Mondays, broadcast live on the social media accounts of Peter Zaleski and Jenny Huertas.
Happy Monday! This is Peter Zaleski. I'm a condo consultant. I'm also the founder of the Miami Condo Investing Club. If you see me on a Monday, that means it is time for our live broadcast, the Miami Condo Mondays podcast, where we talk about what's going on, a particular topic, a submarket, and or general trend in the Tri-County South Florida condo market, Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach County. Who do I have as a co-host on the show? Jenny Huertas. Jenny Huertas is a licensed real estate broker. She's been doing it north of 20 years. She was a financier before that. Has a company called CVR Realty. You can find her at cvrrealty.com. Our conversation is going to last about an hour or so, and we're not going to tell you what to think, but we're going to give you things to think about. We do these every Monday. We do them at 4 o'clock South Florida time. It's going to go for roughly about an hour or so, as mentioned. So if you are caught in traffic, turn off that 1980s soft rock. If you were sick of listening to your boss, you want to doze off for that last hour if you work a traditional work week, go ahead and tune us in. We're going to be live on all the social media channels, including LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, as well as on Substack. You can find the podcast on my Substack and or Jenny Huertas' Substack. So I'd encourage you to check us out, and hopefully we're going to give you some fantastic information, and you might learn something along the way during the course of this 1-hour conversation. The podcast will be uploaded shortly thereafter, and you'll be able to find it again on the Substack for Peter Zaleski or the Substack for Jenny Huertas. For me, you can go to miamicondo.club. All that being said, Jenny, how's it going? How was your weekend?
Good. It's all good. Happy Monday. How are you?
Yeah, happy Monday. It is a hot Monday. Apparently, I was watching the weather last night, and looks like it's going to be one of these Sahara sand summers, which means the sand from Africa, continent of Africa, gets blown over the Atlantic and basically creates some sort of situation where it's not as hurricane prone. There's a center out of Colorado. They're the ones who make the calls on the hurricane with their projections and stuff like that. They're actually anticipating fewer hurricanes this season. So I can tell you it's dry. They were talking about 105 degrees this week in South Florida. I don't ever remember that. It's always typically, it would get to 95, and then about 4 o'clock or so, it pissed down rain, and then the rest of the afternoon, or evening, would be fine. It doesn't seem to be like that anymore.
Wow.
Okay, all right. That was that was definitely a good reaction. Jenny, for our conversation today, we're going to be talking about. I did a tour on Saturday. I do these walking tours, or 3-hour tours. We wander around about 4 miles. I give people a handout of all the condo projects in a particular submarket and teach them how to analyze buildings. So if they're buyers, if they're sellers, if they're lenders, anything like that, they get a good grasp of what's going on. So we're going to talk about some of the statistics that we were able to pull up in anticipation of this tour. We looked at what's called the Biscayne Boulevard Corridor. It's an area that stretches from the MacArthur Causeway in greater downtown Miami all the way north to the Julia Tuttle. Will be Biscayne Bay, all the way west to Interstate 95. Some of you might not recognize it as a Biscayne Boulevard corridor, but you might recognize neighborhoods like Edgewater, like Midtown, and like Wynwood. Jenny, you ready to talk about Biscayne Boulevard corridor, Edgewater, Midtown, and Wynwood?
Absolutely. We're ready.
All right. So to give people kind of a layout of how we're kind of describing it, and keep in mind, these neighborhoods basically have come online in the last 10 to 15 years. For instance, there's a condo in the Edgewater neighborhood that's called the Wynwood Lofts. but it's in Edgewater. Just to show you, nobody really knew what the hell Wynwood was or Edgewater or anything like that. So our definition is going to be pretty simple. It's going to be Miami Avenue East, to the Bay, and Wynwood will be Miami Avenue West to the Bay, and ultimately Midtown is going to be between Miami Avenue, Northeast 2nd, and 29th Street will be the southern boundary. So instead of the MacArthur, it'll be 29th. It'll be that little pocket which used to be the carriage. What do you call it? Storage area for the trains for Florida East Coast Rail. When they would come back and forth between Jacksonville and Florida, they would drop off, carriages or trailers, whatever you want to call it, that was connected to the train. That's where they used to keep it. And for the longest time, that area was kind of carved off from the rest of the general neighborhoods. About 2004, 2003, 2002, somewhere in there, they decided to basically sell that Florida East Coast Rail, which originally dates back to Henry Flagler, the gentleman who brought the train all the way down to Key West, brought it to Miami, and basically triggered Miami being incorporated in 1896. So that area was sold off. Two developers bought it, and they started building. They split it up. They had residential on the east side. They had retail on the west side. So we're going to be getting into that. Jenny, what when somebody sort of talks to you about this area, whether it be Midtown, Wynwood, or Edgewater, what are sort of some of the things you think about it, and what are some of the questions that you typically get from some of the customers and clients you work with as a real estate broker?
Well, if it's Edgewater, there is nothing to walk to. So pretty much they're selling the views because they are on the bay, and they're trying to sell condos that have sort of all-inclusive concept where they do have restaurants in the place, and they do have amazing amenities, even paddleboards or kayaks to go on the bay. And because there is not really a place to walk, just part of it, like from the 15th Street to 22nd, you have some sort of, you can walk, you can get the Metro Mover right there, but not really a walking destination. As you go north from 28 to 36, is nothing to walk to. And Wynwood, it was a hippie area, and it's still, I think it's not there yet as far as services like Publix, like supermarkets and things like that. And then Midtown, it is a place where you can actually have more services. You have more shops, and you're next to the design district. So they're close to each other, but they are different in what they have to offer. Absolutely different. One, the water, no walking. The other one, some sort of services, and the other one has more appeal because it has actually access to I-95 as well. So it's just completely different areas.
Okay. Let me kind of lay it out from my perspective for the audience, whether you know South Florida, you don't know South Florida. Maybe I'll teach you something if you do know South Florida, but didn't necessarily realize it. So before the real boom that occurred in 2002, remember, Florida condo law was set up in 1963. Between 1963 and 2001, you had about 11,500 condos in greater downtown Miami. If you watched our podcast in the past, you know we now are on pace for 59,000. During the boom that led to the Great Recession, they put up about 22,000 units. So we went from 11,500 for 40 years. Suddenly we jumped to 33,000, and now we're going to push 59,000 units. So the way it kind of worked out in this Biscayne Boulevard corridor area is, and the way I like to describe it, is typically, think of it like a law firm, like who works in a law firm. So your admin assistants and your new hires, the person working in the mail room, if they get mail anymore, they'd be living in this Biscayne Boulevard corridor, from my perspective. Now, as you evolved in your career, you would then move to the Central Business District, which is going to be the MacArthur Causeway to the Miami River. And then once you were a managing partner and able to sit back and count the cash, and you had already made it, then you're living in the Brickell Avenue area. So that's kind of, generally speaking, how it went. Now, in terms of what was existing in this Biscayne Boulevard corridor, for the longest time before the boom of 2002, this was all 1- and 2-story apartment buildings. You had, there was no parking, there were chickens, there were dogs, wild dogs, all of the places, all the streets go east-west. Therefore, the houses and properties are located north-south. So that created an issue for condo developers because they need properties that are basically going east-west, not north-south, because of views. You get more money for a waterfront view than you do for a view, looking at the city. So that created all kinds of issues. The streets were also very narrow. We did tours, Jenny, if you remember. We would do these tours. You'd take a bus that was a size that would go from like Miami to New York with 55 people. You couldn't make turns because it was so, the infrastructure was such. This Edgewater area, they actually had what people called a monastery. There was a religious center that was located right on the water. It had residential. It had, whatever else it had. So this is what the neighborhood was. It was a hodgepodge. You had a place that sold like, what do they call it? Oriental rugs or Middle Eastern rugs. These are some of the signs.
Yeah.
This is also the area where hookers, hookers. There was a Super Bowl held in Miami, I don't know, 20 years ago or so. A player, a lineman from the Atlanta Falcon, he actually got arrested the night before the Super Bowl for trying to pick up a prostitute in and around this area. So this used to be a no-go zone. The 2002 boom really sort of brought it through to fruition. So a lot of that was the Edgewater area. That would have been off of Biscayne Boulevard. Then when you get to the Midtown area, as mentioned, this was a storage facility for carriages, like the big rails. So if you ever drive in and you get caught by the train, and you see all these rails going by with the, they have containers stacked going to the Port of Miami. This is where they used to keep them. And then just to the west of that was the Wynwood area. Wynwood was the warehouse area before Durrell got created. Durrell got created in the the 80s, 70s or so. Before that, this is where you did all the storage. This is where you had the manufacturing. This is where you had the bakery. And then just on the north side of Wynwood is where you had the Puerto Rican community. So they call it Little San Juan. This was the concentration of the Puerto Rican community. So if you kind of think about it, off 29th, on the south side of 29th, going west of Miami Avenue, is where you had all the industrial, you had the warehouse, you had the manufacturing. You even at one time, Jenny, Miami-Dade County, they owned a free trade zone. They built a center, and the thing went BK. I never used the word BK, but it actually went BK. It was ultimately acquired by an out-of-town investor. They purchased it. They've now positioned it. They used, they dressed it up. They did some stuff. They now use it like a convention center of sorts. But I mean, how does a free trade zone in Miami, where 54% of the residents are foreign born, how does it go bankrupt? So this is what the area was. I remember, it had a reputation for chop shops. Wynwood, they steal your car, they bust it up in the parts, and then they're shipping them off somewhere. They're doing whatever they're doing. So that's kind of where we were. And then my final point, Jenny, and then I want you to sort of chime in. My final point is right now we are in an anti-trade mentality with the current presidential administration, tariffs, bring jobs back, blah, blah, blah. Well, there was a time when they were all about globalization, all the time following NAFTA. There was a run where there was something called the Free Trade Area of the Americas. It was actually, Miami was positioning itself to be the headquarters for this. So any country within the Americas, basically from Tierra del Fuego down in Chile and Argentina all the way up to Alaska, everybody would be able to trade in. Miami wanted to be the headquarters. Panama City was vying for it. So they held an event here, a ministerial event, which I don't think you can ever see today, given the current climate. And there was a anti-free trade, a global anti-globalization group that got together, and they were basically storming and protesting. And their base was actually located on Miami Avenue and about 28th Street. Ultimately, the site was torn down, and it was turned into a condo, a failed condo, which ultimately came back, called Synergy. So that's the real history that I've seen since 1993 when I got to Miami. Jenny, please correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, because I think people sort of think what they're looking at, oh yeah, it's always been around. This is this is Miami created.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. The people had no idea what it was before. And even for us that were living there, I mean, Miami, we have no clue that area in Midtown was not even like you can see it because it was like they will have a lot of containers there. So we have no clue that that area was going to develop, or Wynwood for that matter. Wynwood was also created. And Midtown, remember, Midtown was a failed project, and it was free parking for many, many years. And now you pay $4 to park for 1 hour in Midtown.
Yep.
But times have changed. A lot of things. The San DC was just a place where they have stores for furniture, for decorating the houses, stuff like that. And now it's just a completely different animal. So yes, it's important to know the history, so you have an idea what these visionaries or these people that was trying to develop were thinking of. I think Edgewater was listen everything that is on the water, try to attract people to the bay views, but traffic is bad already. So I don't know how it's gonna. I mean, where you go? I mean, you really don't have ways to go. It's just like Biscayne Boulevard and that's it. So that's interesting to see, how it's going to develop.
Yeah, so if we could sort of address that. So one of the big issues in this area, which is basically going to go from MacArthur Causeway up all the way up to the Julia Tuttle. You got the Bay, you got the I-95. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you got the train tracks that go right down the middle, and for the longest time, because whatever reason, I don't know if it was sketchy neighborhoods. Remember, Miami's got a history of building walls and keeping certain people out. So I don't know what it is, but if you are on the east side of the train tracks and you want to go to the west side of the train tracks, once you get north of, because of one-way streets and other things, basically you only got a couple ways to do it. You can do it off 36th Street, which would be the northern boundary, which, by the way, on the north side of 36th Street and north side of Julia Tuttle, that's where the design district is that Jenny just referenced. So that'll be outside Greater Downtown Miami based on the boundaries we put in place, and our boundaries are based on physical, barriers or so. So if you want to get from east to west, so you want to get from Edgewater over to Wynwood or Edgewater, possibly even the parts of Midtown, you got to go over train tracks. And based on going over the train tracks, you only got a few options. You can go in off 36th Street. You can go in off of 29th. Potentially you go off 28th, or you can't go across the tracks till the 20th. And as a result, everything bottlenecks. It's kind of like an hourglass where, it's all, if there was a way to get across it, the government hasn't said anything whatsoever about simply putting rail crossings on some of these other streets. You want to alleviate traffic, I would say that'd go a long way to do it. But right now, it's like you're on a peninsula and you can't get across. So as a result, I would tell you my personal experience, and I had my, our offices were there, I lived there, basically from 7:30 a.m. till 10, and then again from like maybe 2:30 until about 7, traffic is at a standstill, and you were better off walking than actually driving. And good luck calling an Uber. By the time they get there, I mean, it almost feels like a big event is going on, like every day, simply because of the traffic infrastructure. Am I getting that right, Jenny, or am I wrong?
Yes, and it doesn't help that the developers change closing the streets for the projects, so you don't have a way to maneuver on the streets that are closer to the water. So that, in a combination with the traffic itself, you have no way to go.
Yep, you're right. You have no way to go. So all that being said, let's go ahead and let's get into just some of the things that popped up as I was going ahead and doing the tour. And again, I do these tours on Saturdays. I'm not doing any in August. This upcoming Saturday, we're going to be doing one of the Brickell Avenue area. It's a market that represents about 101 projects, somewhere in the vicinity of 30,000 units or so, ballpark. So that if you want information on that, go to miamicondo.club, miamicondo.club, or you go directly to the ticketing exchange or ticketing source, where tickets are sold. MiamiCondoClub.eventbrite.com, MiamiCondoClub.eventbrite.com. So Jenny, going through the stats, I find it kind of interesting. So Wynwood, which had been all industrial, and then as it started to evolve, it kind of turned into a night spot. Although closing time, last call at the bars, is not as late as it is in maybe like down in Central Business District around the World Center, or even parts of South Beach. So, but Wynwood now is getting condos, Jenny. It's been getting rentals, but now it's getting condos. All those little single family homes that were owned, all of them have been acquired for the most part. They've all been